Anime, on the whole, has never been better than it was in 2021. The year came packed with so many heavy-hitting blockbusters, surprise cult hits, and lovingly crafted instant classics that no other even comes close, and it's effectively impossible to name a single anime of the year. But you know what they say, the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. For all the incredible new heights that certain anime soared to in the last 365 days, there were other shows that sunk to deeper, inkier, stinkier depths than ever before. Reboots no one asked for. Unstoppable engines of aching, inconsolable disappointment. A haphazard 3D rendering of the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. With the new hottest trash of the season series, my chief goal has been to celebrate the sheer audacity of anime that dare to defy good taste and good sense. To roast them tough-lovingly, instead of just mercilessly shitting on them. You will see a bit of that in this video too, but make no mistake, what you're watching now is not a dumpster fire. This is a public toilet. And our only goal today is to pick out the corniest, sloppiest dookies in the anime bowl, ranked based on a combination of objective technical failings and how much pain they caused me personally, then point at them and laugh. These are the absolute worst anime of 2021, brought to you by Rosetta Stone. With New Year's resolutions close at hand, now's a prime time to pick up a new language. Perhaps an anime-related one? If you don't want to put it back down by February, though, you need to learn in a way that's fun and intuitive. A way that really sticks. Rosetta Stone has been around since immediately after we stopped using these, which, if your gateway anime was FMA or later, probably look about as ancient to you as the actual Rosetta Stone. And the reason they've really stuck around for all that time, providing teaching tools not just to regular citizens, but to some of the biggest corporations and governments out there, is because, simply put, their simple method really works. Starting with day-to-day basics, Rosetta Stone puts a picture of a thing or a person doing a thing in front of your face, then tells you how to describe it in your new language of choice, and has you infer, based on similar pictures, what all the words in that sentence you just used mean, and how to use them to string together a new one. The app turns language into a game or a puzzle, just like it was when you were a baby picking up your first words. And it has both true accent speech recognition technology and live language coaches on hand to ensure you're saying all those words correctly. Rosetta Stone's made learning Japanese feel easy and natural for me, and with each lesson clocking in at under half an hour in an app available on mobile and PC, it's just as easy to squeeze in daily practice where and whenever my unpredictably hectic YouTubing schedule allows. And what's more, Rosetta Stone's put together a special holiday deal just for you basement dwellers. All you gotta do is click the link in the doobly-doo, and you can get a lifetime subscription to all of their language programs for just $179. That's almost 50% off the standard price of $299 and less than you'd pay for a 2-year subscription to just one language. This is a deal you don't want to miss, so click that link and start speaking your new language today. Alright, with that said, let's get this shitstorm underway. Ahem. Ragnarok, a pitched death battle between the mightiest warriors in mankind's history and the mightiest gods across all of our pantheons. The prize on the line? Nothing less than our very existence as a species. It's a contest of will and skill alike, the likes of which the whole of the cosmos has never witnessed before. An event to end all events, the mere thought of which sends shivers down even the stiffest of spines. Can you imagine a more perfect setup for a battle anime? Well, the thing about setups is, without a good punchline, even the best ones are worthless. With frequently janky art and animation, bafflingly composed storyboards, and distractingly familiar sound design, the Netflix original Record of Ragnarok was an apocalyptic disappointment on every conceivable level. Now, you might have seen a shortish clip of me and the Trash Taste Boys reacting to this show's first fight and even getting a bit hyped about it. While I can only speak for myself in that situation, I assure you that that hype was genuine, but that's only thanks to the format it was presented to me in. Watching the curated clip that Netflix sent us to react to, I got to see the opening blows of the battle between Thor and Lu Bu play out in the space of about 6 minutes that I thought represented the first chunk of episode 1. In the actual anime, that same fighter intro and exchange of exactly 3 attacks takes almost half an hour and ends halfway through episode 2. And that is just a fraction of the fight's total 4.5 episode runtime. And there are only 12 episodes in the whole season. Forget the jank. Record of Ragnarok's biggest problem, by far, is its utterly atrocious structure and pacing. Imagine, if you will, a version of Dragon Ball Z that starts in medias res during the iconic first fight between Goku and Vegeta. Only, right as Goku's winding up his first punch, we suddenly flash back to a 2-minute montage of him training under Grandpa Gohan and meeting Bulma. Then, after the punch connects, all of the surviving Z-Fighters take turns reacting to it, commenting on how hard Goku punched that guy and talking at length about what a cool dude he is. Then the World Tournament announcer dude flies over in a helicopter to offer his color commentary on the fight choreography, and then, finally, Vegeta starts winding up his own first punch, only for us to flash back to his harsh childhood training as a Saiyan warrior. Then that punch connects, and every single surviving Z-Fighter reacts to how hard it was and despairs at how strong and evil this guy is. And the World Tournament announcer is like, "Damn, that punch was incredible!" And somehow Frieza's also watching, and he gives an approving, maniacal laugh. Realizing how strong his opponent is, Goku gets ready to unleash his Kaioken, and we cut away to a 3-minute montage of him training with King Kai. After that, there's a solid minute of him screaming and slowly turning red. Then he hits Vegeta once, and every single person watching offers their color commentary again, including Hercule, who's here now somehow. This pattern continues until the fight concludes sometime around the heat death of the universe. That's what Record of Ragnarok is like. Its individual moments of animated action can actually kick a decent quantity of ass. Its flashbacks to important moments in the history of its human fighters and the most killer combat feats of its pantheon of gods can be pretty cool too, like Thor single-handedly fending off an Attack on Titan-style onslaught of Jotnar invading Valhalla. The color commentary parts can even be pretty fun and witty when they want to be. There's a lot of big personalities sitting around this Colosseum with a lot of interesting things to say. But by constantly jumping between these different modes of storytelling and letting each one play out just long enough to ruin the flow of whatever it's interrupting while still being too short to satisfy on its own, Record of Ragnarok manages to drain from each and every one of these moments each and every ounce of hype that wasn't already canceled out by the PowerPoint-esque fluidity of the action. It's almost impressive how consistently this show is able to turn each potential climax into a shuddering feeling of disappointment, like the seinen battle equivalent of edging. There's plenty of content here that's fun and or awesome enough on paper to have me hooting and hollering at the screen in delight, like Thor throwing his awakened, engorged hammer in a boomerang attack that's actually just the wind-up for an even bigger ultimate thunder clapback, or Hermes playing a rockin' rainbow violin solo to get Zeus literally pumped up for his fight with Adam. But all that potential's squandered when Zeus just keeps on gyrating until the bit goes from funny to uncomfortable, loops back to funny, and then becomes uncomfortable again. Without fail, every cool moment in Record of Ragnarok is dragged both down and out into mundane mediocrity. Which is a shame, because the manga this anime is based on is clearly gorgeous, and from everything I've heard, it kicks a godly amount of ass to boot. And I don't even need to read it to have an idea of how good it is. Most of the things that happen in this anime would be amazing if only I could read them at my own pace and the art actually looked like art. This is the rare anime adaptation so bad that it makes you feel like a disappointed fan, even if you've never read a page of the source material in your life. Well, I say rare, but there's actually quite a few of those this year. Video game adaptations have a long and storied legacy of crushing disappointment and laughable ineptitude across every linear narrative medium you can name. But even more than Hollywood, the anime industry has proven to have a real passion for turning long-beloved works of interactive art and scrappy newcomers looking to pull a Pokemon alike into barely watchable piles of dog doo. And even in the age of Castlevania, Bomberman, Jetters, and Arcane, that hasn't changed. Last year, Dragon's Dogma fans got to taste the Danganronpa delicious despair of seeing their favorite franchise get the old Uva Bowl. And this year, The World Ends With You fans were subjected to a soulless speed run of their favorite game. Blue Reflection aficionados, if those are even a thing, were given the old JC staff shaft. Uma Musume stands were incredibly well fed, as all Cygames fans always are, and fans of every other gacha game starved. Again, as they always do. Any one of those, except Uma Musume and Tactop Destiny, could have taken this slot. Deep Insanity, The Lost Child, came within a hair's breadth. But, at least that low-rent Made in Abyss clone had some nice background art and music in it. Scarlet Nexus, on the other hand, doesn't even have that much going for it, which is especially weird when the game it's based on contains absolutely visionary environments and absolutely bangin' jams that combine to form a truly pristine vibe. My issue isn't just that the anime's sets are ugly in comparison to the game, though boy howdy, they sure fucking are. Half the time it's flat concrete textures and hastily scribbled rubble as far as the eye can see. But the other half of the time, the show doesn't even have backgrounds. Just fugly off-model characters flailing around in front of a flat, monocolor void. Or some default particle effects if the show's feeling fancy. And the music that replaced the aforementioned lo-fi jams somehow manages to be even less distinct and memorable than that. That leaves the story and characters to carry the whole show all by themselves, and one of the game's chief selling points is that it's basically a fun 7 out of 10 sci-fi action anime you can play, so it's actually not inconceivable that that could work. Unfortunately, the show's writers also completely bunged up the plot in a way that makes the male protagonist come off like he's stalking his female counterpart instead of just meeting her coincidentally when shit hits the fan the first time. And, even worse, it totally spoils twists that are supposed to come hours into the game right in the first episode. So, watching even a little bit of this anime will actively diminish your early enjoyment of the game it's supposed to be selling you. It is hard to imagine a worse sin for an adaptation to commit than that. But as an anime, Scarlet Nexus commits an even greater sin. It's just plain fucking boring. It doesn't even ruin the game's plot in a funny or entertaining way. It just saps every last scene of every drop of hype and fun while hinting at future spoilers in a desperate BBC Sherlockian bid to convince you that if you just keep watching, it might get good eventually. The rest of the shows I'm about to tear apart are worse made in a lot of ways, but of all the bad anime I watched this year, Scarlet Nexus is probably the one I enjoyed the least. Luckily, the next entry takes us out the other end of this so bad it's bad valley and back into primo hate watch territory. Battle Athletes Victory Restart is a reboot of and stealth sequel to the original Battle Athletes, a weird, horny cult hit from the 90s about a distant dystopian future where instead of doing dumb stuff like wars and elections, all of humanity's solar solar system spanning civilization decides its leadership based entirely on which space colony's spandex-clad teenage girl of choice is the best at a series of absurdly high-tech Takeshi's Castle challenges called the Divine Sports Festival, or the God-large athletic meet if you go by Protag Chan's English epilogue PowerPoint pledge to, quote, completely separate sports festivals and politics. I've already given this show a pretty thorough roasting as part of the hottest trash of summer, so I won't bore you by rehashing those character descriptions and G Gundam comparisons, though I will repeat, because it bears infinite repeating, that this is one of the ugliest fucking anime I have ever laid eyes on. I'd say the artwork looks like ass, but considering the Hank Hill thing most of the girls in this attempt at ecchi have going on, that would actually be a compliment. Though the funny thing is, that bottom-of-the-barrel animation ends up being the show's single greatest saving grace as a piece of entertainment. See, this is one of those anime whose whole plot feels like the product of a drunken game of Mad Libs played by registered sex offenders, and whose chief directing priority seems to be jamming its camera straight up a coochie whenever the opportunity arises, and that could get very creepy given some of the places that story goes. But since it's impossible to imagine anyone other than Pablo Picasso fapping to this shit, you can just laugh at the spectacle of an Illuminati boss who is also a gorilla ook-ooking at his minions to put 2 more plates on an enormous barbell that's being held aloft by a 6-year-old girl in a skin-tight bodysuit without having to think too much about the last part of that sentence. I call this the producer's principle. A bad idea executed competently is just boring and unpleasant. But when a bad idea is botched to hell and back, that becomes a true spectacle. And even as I was regaling you with tales of a Yu-Gi-Oh-faced, thigh-high wearing terrorist, absolute terrorist, if you will, convincing her old moon buddy to sneak an invisible regular gun into a kayak race where the goal is to shoot a giant space whale with a fireworks plunger gun, I had no idea how much of a spectacle this show would end up making of itself past what I'd already watched. In the very next episode, the absolute terrorist blows herself up by standing... said blows herself in the script. I just read... In the very next episode, the absolute terrorist blows herself. I just wrote blows herself. I forgot the up. I don't know why this is so funny. Fuck. I'm a child. A man-child. In the very next episode, the absolute terrorist blows herself up by standing on top of a bomb that devastates an entire stadium and can be seen a mile away when it goes off. And then, when she miraculously reappears on the moon in the epilogue, her only explanation for how she survived all that is, it takes a lot more than that to kill me. Like, what? Are you a Super Saiyan? She also uses a long car ride with a cop who's happy to speak to her because even if you're a terrorist, you're still a lady, to drop a massive exposition dump about the 1/3 gorilla Illuminati, which is actually called the Control Committee. They're a secret cabal of powerful businessmen who control the whole of solar system society from behind the scenes, not by traditional secret cabal means like manipulating politicians or even bribing cops, apparently, since they get arrested at the end of the show, but through the much less convoluted method of kidnapping women with, quote, good athletic genes and using them to eugenics together an army of super athletes that's been winning the Cosmo Beauty crown on their behalf for the last few decades. Protag Chan Kanada's main rival, the white-haired, golden-eyed, cool beauty Ava Gallenstein, is the latest and greatest product of this program and, under normal circumstances, would be a cinch to win. But because she briefly escaped from the committee to Earth when she was a kid and had to have memories of meeting Kanada down there erased as a result, she starts having these amnesia headaches that throw her off her game. The big bads don't want a tool who can't win, of course, so in response to this, they cart out a new, upgraded clone of Ava with red eyes to replace her, and... hold up.
Wait a a minute!
This is starting to sound kind of familiar. A secret organization of dudes in expensive suits with ridiculous beards and opaque sci-fi sunglasses, an emotionless albino clone who's been genetically modified for superior performance and gets replaced immediately when she fails to live up to that, and she's named Ava? I'd say Hideaki Anno should sue these fellas, but he'd have to take a number behind the Tekken team. Anyway, the upgraded Ava 2.0 if you will, is an intimidating, seemingly impassable threat for Kanata for exactly one episode's worth of Ninja Warrior shenanigans. Then, in the following game of zero-gravity giant globe billiards, she's suddenly able to match her superhuman rival, literally blow for blow, only falling behind her at the last second because, I think the Illuminati hit a taser in her last cue ball or something. It doesn't really matter. She's totally fine by the next episode, in which the whole of this epically absurd athletic contest ends quite anticlimactically with a simple 100-meter dash, which Kanata wins by floppy Naruto running past the genetic freak so fast she outruns the edge of her own animation cell, fueled by rainbow glowing energy that is quite literally the power of friendship. Then, as she finally takes the podium, she dramatically exposes the whole of the Control Committee's conspiracy using, I promise I'm not making this up, an R2-D2 hologram recording of Ava's mom that was hidden inside the special sweatbands Ava gave Kanata during her brief stay on Earth, and which can only be activated by a folksy future Hokkaido colloquialism that happens to be Kanata's grandmother's catchphrase. Then, within literal seconds of that, Officer Geoff suddenly appears in their secret nerve boardroom, the location of which has never been revealed, with an army of RoboCops to bring the committee in and lock them up in a minimum security cartoon pirate jail. I honestly can't think of a single aspect of this anime that actually works or even makes any sense on any level whatsoever. Battle Athlete's Victory Restart is a gloriously catastrophic train wreck. But 2021 was a wild year, and somehow, two shows managed to be even worse. It's hard to put into words just how much it hurts me to say this, but at the same time, it does need to be said. The second worst anime of the year is, without a shred of doubt in my mind, a show that does not exist. They never made it. It's not real, and it can't hurt me. But hypothetically, if A1 Pictures had released a second season of The Promised Neverland this year, and just as hypothetically, they totally rewrote the story, skipping over all the best parts of the manga and ruining the impact of everything they did keep in on the way to a half-baked, semi-original remix of the ending with writing that's literally on par with Batman v Superman, that would be what's in this slot, because in that, again, totally hypothetical scenario, that anime wouldn't just have ruined itself by being awful, it would have retroactively tainted the legacy of one of 2019's absolute best shows, and all but killed the possibility of fans ever seeing the manga story we actually fell in love with brought to life. It would have been a kick in the teeth and slap in the face all at once. A betrayal on the same level as discovering that the woman who raised you was actually fattening you up to be fed to literal demons all along. If it existed, which it doesn't, but if it did, I don't know if my brain could even properly process the prospect of it. The mere thought of that anime makes me so angry and depressed that I can scarcely bring myself to speak about it now. So it's a real good thing that it doesn't exist, and I just had to reserve this slot on my list for the disappointment of The Promised Neverland 2 being suddenly canceled right before it was supposed to air. And then also Cloverworks personally mailed every single fan of the series a drawing of Emma giving us the middle finger. Because, yeah, that definitely happened and sucked a lot and was super shitty, but that's still nowhere near as shitty and insulting as it would have been if the anime I made up in my nightmares was real. But it's not. Everything's fine. There's only room for one truly unthinkable anime horror this year, after all, and First Place has had that room booked to capacity for a long damn time now. I try not to judge anime too harshly by their trailers alone, But to be honest, I knew which show would be the worst of 2021 before I even started writing my list for 2020. I think we all did. On November 6th of last year, Crunchyroll dropped an absolute turd of a trailer for a CGI anime so paint-strippingly stinky that the Berserk community started putting together emergency care packages for fans of the affected manga. And that manga's name was X-Arm. Every character model in that trailer looked like a bootleg knockoff of itself, with wildly disproportionate limbs, drawn-on cleavage, and mannequin-dead faces. Every last background asset looked like it was pulled straight off the Unity store, and the animated action set in those environments had the feel of puppets being slapped together by children in zero gravity. But even given all of that, the most ominous thing about that trailer was the knowledge, implicit in its very existence, that this was the most impressive part of the show. These were the scenes and shots the creators thought were most worthy of, quote, declaring war on all the sci-fi series of the world. It could only ever have gone downhill from there. But still, none of us were prepared for just how low X-Arm really goes. For the revelation that its laughable declaration of war was not the peak of its hubris, but merely the tip of a colossal iceberg. There were bad anime before X-Arm, and there will be bad anime after it, but none of those were, or we can only hope will ever again be, helmed by a live-action TV director with zero animation experience and animated at a CGI studio whose closest thing to an anime credit is some undefined outsourcing work on FromSoft's various Souls-likes. Director Yoshikatsu Kimura believed that, as an anime newcomer, he wouldn't be tied down by how things are usually done, and yeah, I can see that in this show, but the thing is, making 3D anime is really fucking hard, actually. There's just a lot more things that can go wrong compared to when you're working in 2D. And usually, things are done the way they're done to avoid those many problems. So this is, seemingly by design, the CG anime equivalent of Sideshow Bob in that parking lot full of rakes. Any amateur hour animation mistake you can think of crops up multiple times an episode here. Obvious model clipping, stiff pose-to-pose animation tweening that makes the characters look like animatronics, the telltale jittery movement of totally unprocessed motion capture data, 2D background characters, and main characters who look wildly out of place next to the CG. You name it, it's here. But X-Arm also invents a bunch of brand new problems, the likes of which literally haven't been seen since before the dawn of 3D animated television. Like, even in the pilot episode of Reboot, the characters could point their eyes at things and do more with their mouths than flap them up and down like a marionette. And while I have seen more than my fair share of janky compositing shortcuts, the stock smoke effect overlay that they chose to loop over practically every scene of every episode of X-Arm has gotta be the worst by far. Even at a quarter opacity, the swirling patterns in the smoke are more often than not the most animated things on the entire screen, meaning that you end up watching them like a DVD logo about to maybe hit the corner instead of the fight or conversation behind them that you're supposed to be paying attention to, which is actually kind of a small mercy for us in the audience, given that the story's been so badly butchered that the lead writer, Tommy Morton, asked to be credited under that obvious pseudonym instead of taking the blame for it. And the manga wasn't even that great to begin with. It's difficult to put into words just how bad of an adaptation this really is. I've heard from acquaintances in the book publishing biz that the Ari Ferretta and Master of Ragnarok and Blesser of Einherjar anime were poorly received enough to cripple their respective light novel sales, but those series are both still limping along today. Meanwhile, the X-Arm manga was cancelled by Shueisha 2 weeks before the anime even finished. That is how quickly and thoroughly it dragged that brand name into the gutter. Well, that's one interpretation. There is also the possibility that the manga's readership was waning before the anime even started, and its continuation was contingent on the show doing well and picking those numbers back up. Having looked at the source material, it honestly wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. The original manga's sci-fi setting is clearly inspired by the philosophical cyberpunk geopolitics of Ghost in the Shell, and Shinya Komi sure can draw a mean pair of robot tits, but that's about the full extent of the series' so-called seinen maturity. The actual plot that drives it forward, though, has all the narrative nuance and depth of a Saturday morning cartoon. Specifically Shaolin Showdown, or Jackie Chan Adventures if you prefer. Like talismans and Shengang Wu, the titular X-Arms are powerful artifacts with near-magical abilities that surpass most human weaponry. In this case of alien rather than ancient Chinese mystical origin, but that matters very little. All of the bad guys in the world are out to get him, of course, because they're so powerful, so it's up to a squad of good guys to get him first. The process of getting him does involve more shootouts in casinos and robot brothels than you'd expect to see cartoon Jackie improv-fooing his way through, and on occasion one of the characters will echo an interesting idea that a smarter sci-fi anime has already covered, but it's all affectation. X-Arm is only edgily aping the aesthetics of depth and maturity, as it's busy splashing about in a cartoon kiddie pool. Thrust into the middle of this mindlessly typical MacGuffin hunt is a typical Tokyo teen named Akira Natsume, whose cybernetic researcher brother saved his brain in an X-Arm box after a car accident destroyed his body. Decades later, when he's recovered from a group of smugglers by a cop named Minami and her sexy android partner Alma, he agrees to use his wireless super hacking abilities to help them and the government track down other X-Arms before they cause more X-harm. But because an evil tech wizard who looks an awful lot like Akira multicast Gravira on Tokyo and really fucked it up back in the day, the department keeps our hero on a very short leash. One that is made of leather and clearly intended for sexy purposes. Those hacking abilities, and with them access to Akira's super fighting robot body called Ogre, are restricted by a DNA lock that only his human handler Minami can undo. And the only way to undo it is to scan her lip print and saliva in Alma's mouth. So yeah, part of the procedure for the protag-kun of this anime suiting up for battle is two chicks making out. Only, of course, these character models are nowhere near articulated enough to actually sell a convincing kiss, and the animator's solution to that problem was to just clip their lips into each other and cover up the intersecting weirdness with a bright white point light, which kinda looks exactly like a typical anime censorship technique. Like I said, there's a lot of bad anime out there, but this is the only one I've seen where the animation is so terrible, it's accidentally homophobic. I digress, though. Now, if you're thinking it's a bit lazy for a schlocky cyberpunk manga pastiche to name its main character who has experimental mental powers, Akira, just wait till you see the show's final boss. Technically, it is different, since this Akira is fighting the massive monstrosity of metal and flesh instead of becoming it, but just as technically, since that's his evil brain clone Akira Beta in there, it's not different at all. Most of the things X-Arm tries to do, other shows, movies, and manga have done far better. But that's true of many a mediocre manga and anime that would never make the top of this list. What makes the X-Arm anime so special is that now I can say with absolute confidence that there is not a single show, movie, or manga out there that has done any of these things worse. And until some brave anime producers decide to put, like, a YouTube comedy skit director in charge of a studio that exclusively does 3D renders for real estate companies or something, it is probably gonna stay that way. I can't say for certain if X-Arm is the absolute worst anime ever made, but it is definitely the worst full-length one that I have ever sat through. And if you've seen more than a few videos on this channel, That should fucking terrify you. As for me, I'm just fucking tired. Not solely on account of watching all this bad anime, though that's definitely not helping. Life has just been a lot this year, for good and for bad, and with this video done, I'm gonna take a break to relax, get on top of some things, and get ready to move into the new house that we just bought. I have written one more video about 86 that'll be coming down the pipeline either later this year or early in the next, but after that, assuming nothing else huge happens in the anime space, the next time you'll hear from me will be the ones to watch for winter 2022. Thank you one last time to Rosetta Stone for sponsoring this video. I'm Geoff Thew, your canary in the anime coal mines, signing